Welcome to another edition of gCaptain Live. This is episode 21, a continuation of our Faro coverage. Another special edition of gCaptain Live. Today on the episode, we're going to talk about the failures of the investigation, how the NTSB and Coast Guard investigation needs to redirect some of its efforts. Yesterday was the most emotional and difficult for me episode I have done here. Not just the 20 episodes of gCaptain Live, but the years that I did the gCaptain podcast. Yesterday was the most difficult. We had Faro family members in the live comment stream, and that transcript, the heroism and the bravery of the crew. And what I really wanted to say, more than anything, if I could boil it down, was the fact that the Coast Guard, the NTSB, the companies, ABS, all of the players are very good. They have a very long history of finding the faults that mariners make out at sea. There's some faults, things that went wrong on the Faro that we will never know the answer to. And then there are things that the crew did wrong. And then there are things that were done wrong by everyone else. Well, some things we'll never find, can't do much about that. What the crew's faults and what they did wrong, the government is very well equipped to find those out. Like I said, there is zero chance that the report will emerge without any fault being recorded of the captain, and I'm almost as sure there'll be some faults found to the crew. That's how investigations have gone for a long time. They're very good at finding at the crew, and the media coverage is going to only increase the spotlight on the crew, and when the lights are all on the crew, everything else is going to go further into darkness. That's the reason I think we need to refocus and push the NTSB as far as possible to refocus. And how do we do that? If you like this episode, share it with the NTSB, share it with the Coast Guard. Call them up, tell them if any of this rings true, what you think. Share this episode and the other episodes and the articles that you read on gCaptain and elsewhere that you think are important, that you think need more investigation. Share them with your fellow mariners, your congressmen, NTSB, and so forth. We need to get the word out there, guys. And there are some things that went wrong besides the actual sinking of the ship that need to be covered. And I have a top 10 list here. This list, number one is my personal thing. I think moving forward, I've read a lot of investigation reports, what needs to change moving forward. But the next 10 are ones collated from you guys. gCaptain is not original content maker. We don't make up these stories. We don't find these stories. We don't have an investigative team like Robert Frumps during the Marine Electric with the Philadelphia Inquirer. I wish we had a team of journalists here who could dig through all of this, dig through all the testimony and all of the facts and all of the information. But that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The Philadelphia Inquirer did it with the Marine Electric. Very expensive. We just don't have that cash available with gCaptain. What we do have is a network of dedicated, caring mariners who can help us out. Now, I said something yesterday. I said that we're possibly putting together a team and use some of our freedom of speech, the Bill of Rights, the first, freedom of the press, and some other things at gCaptain to kind of create a safety zone. And one of the crew members' family wanted me to make sure I told you guys, if you have information, please share it with the Coast Guard. And we have a story here on gCaptain. The Coast Guard came to us yesterday and asked us to push out the news and give their email address. I'm just bringing it up here. All right, I will bring this up on the live screen. So this is the story. U.S. Coast Guard releases new immersion suit survivability data, and within this story is the email. It's lfaro@uscg.mil. So if you have anything that would be useful to the investigation, if you worked at a shipyard or once worked on the El Faro and you have information, please send it to that address. Contact the Coast Guard directly. Any additional things, we would love to hear about a gCaptain, but that's the first step there. So I just want to make that clear. And it's Friday, it's late, a long day here. We've been tearing through a lot of information, talking to a lot of people. And like I said, this information comes from you. I went through all my emails, all my messages, and I really wanted to focus in on what the mariner is worried about, the questions that you want asked that the NTSB is not asking. There are a lot of questions about the captain. The NTSB is investigating that. The crew, the NTSB is investigating that. What, as a ship captain, is in front of the window right now? We have to look out the window. What is the NTSB missing? And that's what I want to talk about. And the first thing on my list, number one, I think the of most critical importance, guys, is shipyard POI. Now, what does that mean? Person of interest is the designation the Coast Guard puts on parties that may have a critical part to play in this. POIs, persons of interest, have special rights. They can assign lawyers. They can ask questions. And in the Deepwater Horizon trial, this was very effective because there's liability. There's liability with BP and Transocean, and often the lawyers came together and fought each other, revealing things that the court could never find. So I think it is critical that shipyards be nominated as persons of interest. For new builds, that means the shipyard that built it, because the shipyards it used to be separate naval architects, would talk to the shipyard and then have owner interest. Now we're having these cookie cutter ship designs, and the shipyards are doing a lot of the engineering and the naval architecture in-house, and they have information, a lot of it proprietary, a lot they don't want to share, that they would need an indictment to share. They have that information. This was not brought up to me, is not my own original idea. The most brilliant book on why we continue to have incidents in 2016, despite all of the new things we now know about training and BRM and incident investigations, plus ECDIS and all this other electronic things that are supposed to help us prevent incident. The incident rate is not going down, and this book talks directly about it. It's by Jack Devaney, who was a naval architecture professor at MIT and a ship operator, and this guy's MIT, guys. This is the best of the best, the brightest. He wrote this book. Now, the price here on Amazon is $125. That's ridiculous, but it's only because it's out of print. But Jack Devaney has released it on his website. If you just Google the tank ship traumedy, you can download it. It's mostly about tankers, but it talks about some of the pernicious problems within. And Jack Devaney's number one thing is we need to make shipyards accountable. When was the last time you saw a shipyard representative at a trial? All right? These are the questions. And because of the age of the El Faro, this is going to be difficult to do with the originating shipyard. It's going to be difficult to find the naval architect who originally put this together. But we don't need to find the original because she has to go into dry docking and have major overhauls. And there are naval architects and shipyard managers who have this information, who have talked to the original guys or read their reports already. So the two organizations I'm going to call out here is number one, Atlantic Marine. The last dry dock period was done at Atlantic Marine in Jacksonville. I think the NTSB is failing us all by maybe they're not persons of interest, but I would love to see the managers, the surveyors, the naval architects at Atlantic Marine brought into the case. I am not saying they're guilty. I'm just saying they have access to information that no one else has, and we need to know that. Again, there is no guilt in this particular case that I see. It may be uncovered with the shipyards. The other shipyard we need to bring into this is Vigor Shipyards. All right, because the Faro was scheduled to do her next period and a major retrofit at Vigor. Now, she hadn't gotten there yet. She was scheduled. But that's not, the work starts before the shipyard period, guys. I guarantee that Vigor did their due diligence. They learned about the ship. They probably sent people to the ship to do initial things. They talked with Tote about the problems on the ship. All right? The only people who really know the problems firsthand are the ship owner, who has a vested interest in Fifth Amendment not being forthright. I'm not saying that Tote is not being forthright, but there's certain things that can be released that would put them in legal liability. And the shipyard. If there was a problem, you know that Tote talked to him. The captain talked to the shipyard. These are the things in shipyard we want to do. These are the things we can't afford to do. This is critical information. So number one thing that the NTSB has to do to get this investigation back on track is bring in the shipyards, starting with Atlantic Marine and starting with Vigor. And I hear good things about Atlantic Marine. I hear good things about Vigor. This is no comment on their ability to perform the job. This is no comment on failures of their part. It is, I want to make that absolutely clear. This is the fact that they had special information, in-house naval architects, in-house surveyors, separate from the surveyors of class, and they had a relationship with the ship owner. So, if you agree with me, again, share this with your friends. Call up the NTSB, email the Coast Guard, email your congressman, tell them where are the shipyard guys involved with this. We want them on the stand. We want them asking questions. We want the email between them and Tote and them and the crew. So that's number one. Number two, guys, another book I want to bring up is Robert Frump's Until the Sea Shall Free Them. If you want to understand what's going on, the problems with investigations, the problems, I mean, Tank Ship Trauma does an excellent job, and it mentions briefly the incident investigations, but this is the last book written that really digs deep into the problems, systemic problems of U.S. Coast Guard and NTSB investigations. And it talks about the marine electric specifically. Now, how is the marine electric pertinent in this case? I have noticed something very troubling, guys. The Deepwater Horizon. One of the major topics of the Deepwater Horizon is there was an OIM and there was a captain. There needs to be one person in charge. All right? In the 1980s, there was the Java Sea, one of the very few American flag drill ships, went down off the coast of Vietnam with, I believe, a loss of 88 people. Some of them, there's some interesting things afterwards, what happened in the whole crew. It's a very intriguing story. But the number one finding of the Java Sea is that the OIM and the captain have to be the one person. There's one person who makes the major calls. And then later on, Transocean in the 90s, a small operator started merging, started going deep water, and they separated. So after the Java Sea, it was in regulation. It's still in regulation that U.S. flag ships have to have one person in charge. But Transocean got away with it because they were foreign flag. So that's a lesson we learned. That was regulated, years later we forgot about it. Casco Busan hit the San Francisco Bay Bridge and spilled oil everywhere. The number one finding of the Exxon Valdez, and we can discuss whether this is accurate or not. I'm not a huge fan of double hull. There are some problems. There may be some better systems. I don't want to get into that. The number one finding of the Exxon Valdez was we need double hulls so that if a tanker goes aground, hits something, there's a void space and oil won't escape into the water, causing a massive pollution. We regulated against it. We OPA 90 the tankers out. Every tanker, single hull, some were giving grandfather dates, every new one built. Now we're at thing, it would be almost all tankers, single hull, are gone. But regulations happen. Years later, the container ship companies go, hey, listen, I would love to put more containers in the hold. How am I going to do that? Hey, why don't we borrow a tanker design? Why don't we do a double hull? So container ship companies start building double hulls, and they decided to put the fuel in the double hull. So there's a single hull between the ocean and the thing. Again, lesson learned, regulated, forgotten. All right? In this particular case, marine electric, number one finding. Again, number one finding was separation of classification and regulatory flag state bodies. Said flag states cannot hand over inspections to the classification society. What do we have again, guys? Alternative Compliance Program. Now, I'm not saying the ACP is at fault for this, but who created the ATC? Who signed off of it? Who is the senior Coast Guard and senior ABS official who signed off on this program? The ACP, for those who aren't familiar, is a program to do exactly what the Marine Electric Investigation Report said cannot be done. Hand some inspections over from the Coast Guard over to class. I'm not saying ABS is good. They're a great organization. They save lives. The Coast Guard clearly saves lives. This particular problem, did the people signing off of it not read the Marine Electric Report? And how do they justify the number one finding in the Marine Electric being overturned in the ACP program? Again, it may lead to nothing. It may be all above bar. It may be kosher. I am not indicting the Coast Guard or ABS. I believe they're both wonderful organizations. I just think, and how many other incidents are there out there that we've regulated against and ship owners have found loopholes, or government organizations or wherever have found loopholes? The number one thing I hear from the families of the El Faro are, I want to make sure we find out what happened so this doesn't happen again. So that person I lost, their son, can feel safe joining the U.S. Merchant Marine. They can feel safe going on things. We don't want to repeat accidents. And that's human nature, isn't it, guys? Well, I'm telling you, there are a lot of findings. These are 3 I'm familiar with. I can think of 4 or 5 other examples off the top of my head. I don't want to go into them, but major findings. I'm not talking about the little ones in the back page of the report. Major findings have been found, regulated against, and now loopholes people are jumping through. We need to close those gaps. NTSB and Coast Guard need to be on top of this. Number 3, bridge resource management. Again, number 2, 3, and all the rest come from forum members, emails, phone calls. This is not my stuff, but I certainly agree with these. How many incidents nowadays, guys? I read so many incident reports in gCaptain. I mean, that's my number one job, right? You guys want to know the incidents. You want to know how to stay safe at sea. gCaptain is the source for that. I can't tell you how many have BRM issues, all right? And they're not the issues we originally found. Again, we have cowboy pilots from Vietnam. They go into the cockpit of liners. Their co-pilots tell them something. They ignore it, crash the plane. That was the development of BRM. Airline industry, cockpit resource management, aggressive guys who weren't listening. I haven't worked with an aggressive camera lately, but I've worked with plenty of passive aggressive. Just because you're nice on the bridge does not mean you're working with the BRM. Think of a captain who I work with universally, everyone, he's the nicest guy. Yes, but is niceness what we need? We have failures of BRM are now coming from the other angle. Instead of the real gung-ho guys, they're coming from the passive aggressives, the guys who avoid the problems. Engine room. involved. When are we going to get those guys involved? This is not indictment against engineers. You guys definitely have enough involved. But there were clear, the master's in control, and did he relay all the information? Did he tell the engine room the criticality of the situation? Did he call down? I can't say exactly what I would have done in the case, but when I'm having an incident, on my ship, I make sure I tell the chief the time frame and the consequences. If the captain had called Richard Pusateri in the engine room and said, hey, if we don't get that boiler online in 20 minutes, we are going to sink. And that's your captain's job, to stand back and really think about these things. Sorry guys, I got to plug this in. I don't think we're going to lose connection. I'm getting an alert saying the battery's dying. 1 second. All right, I hope I'm still in focus and everything's kosher. All right, so communications, BRM, should be renamed. It shouldn't be called BRM. Ship resource management is what I'm talking about, but hey guys, shoreside. All right, we got some of the emails from shoreside to the ship. I haven't seen all of them. I want an MRSAT log. What were the phone calls? Even if it's just time captain called, who he called on shore. MRSAT has a log of the phone calls over the satellite, or did the captain not call anyone? I don't know. Maybe they released the MRSAT log. Maybe it's buried and I just haven't seen it. But shoreside BRM failures, captain called up. You know, you talk about the big companies, and I know it's hard on the small operators, but you go to Maersk and you see they have information coordination centers. You should see their control center for when weather incidents happens. It looks like something, that you imagine in Star Trek. There are all these plasma screen TVs, and there's weather experts and captains and engineers monitoring the storms, monitoring their ships, monitoring their capabilities. I'm not blaming Toad on this. You know, could they afford that? No, but did they bring in weather experts? Did they talk to the weather experts? El Faro had a Bon Voyage system. The forecasters with that system, they should be at the trial. All right, again, no blame here. That system they use is an excellent system. It's one of the best. But we need to consider this. All right, number 4, that was 3, BRM. And again, if the tote can't afford it, that's fine. But maybe we can have a system where a number of small operators, 6, a dozen small operators get together, pool resources to create this incident management center like Maersk has. All right, because it's failing right now. The communications, and it's all the lessons we learned in BRM through shoreside is failing on the small operators. Number 4, shoreside weather. All right, we got the testimony from the National Hurricane Center, meteorologists. Right, who did talk to? Was there a contract? They had a contract with Bon Voyage. Did they have a contract for real world, a phone call of a meteorologist with that company? Let's talk to them. Let's talk to who else had weather information. Let's go down this weather track and find out exactly what has failed on the shore side. And again, all of these things are, hey, the Coast Guard NTSB are going to find fault with the crew. The captain should have done a better job of hurricane avoidance. We know that, but there are other things out, and this doesn't come from me, it comes from the messages. So further investigation into the shoreside weather failings. All right, number 5. The least popular. Hey, Leica. Sorry guys, my dog's here. You want to say hi, Leica? All right, here's my dog. We'll see dog Leica. Hey, I'm trying to do a show. All right. She sees another dog next door. The least popular gCaptain Live episode to date by far was the unboxing of this little guy. What is this guy? Text messages at sea. Go back episode 18, I think. It also has an SOS button. I talked about this guy, right? We have one of the topics that continuously comes up on the gCaptain forum are why wasn't the Coast Guard able to find... Let me pause for a second. Micah. All right, it's not her first show, but there's a dog next door, so I apologize for that, guys. All right, least popular show ever was talking about this. I know you don't want to think about death at sea and the problems that you face and actually having to set these off. This is new, but I had this for a while. Every time I get to a ship, first thing I do is I roll out my Gumby suit or inspect my life jacket. I make sure it works, and then I clip this on. I think part of the problem is you think, oh, I'll never need it. The ship has an EPIRB. One, guys. One isn't enough. The EPIRB on the Faro floated free, operated for 30 seconds, and then went dark. Investigators got to find out what the failing of the EPIRB is. I think there should be an EPIRB. I mean, guys, I bought this on sale for $200. Retail is like $300. This is even cheaper, but it requires a subscription. Why do ships only have one EPIRB? Okay, one float free, fine, but we got inexpensive devices. This is 2016. The future is now, guys. Why don't every lifeboat and life raft have one of these devices? But until that happens, get one of these yourself. Now, and a lot of guys promise their wives when they go out to sea, I will come home, hon. I will never leave you. I'll find a way. I'll swim all the way from the middle of the ocean if I have to. I've never told my wife that, guys. I have never said that to my wife because you can't promise things you can't deliver on. But I do tell her, I will let you know when I'm in trouble. And you got one of these on? Guys, funerals are hard enough. But you know what's worse than a funeral of a loved one? A funeral without anything to bury. Make sure, at least if you don't come home, your family has something to bury. If guys had this on the Faro, A, we'd have more evidence and information. But B, guys, I think's enough said. And with the text messages, you know, for $30 a month, unlimited text, or a lot of text messages to your wife, something happens, there are even pre-programmed alerts. I'm in trouble, love you, talk to you later. You could just press a button and send it. This is important, but as far as the investigation, I don't know why it was the least popular episode of gCaptain Live I've ever produced. I think guys don't want to think about it, but guys, buy it right now. Just go right now to Amazon, buy this, bring it with you, stick it on your life jacket for the hitch, take it off when you're done. Hopefully you'll never use it. But in these intense weather situations, when you abandon ship, things don't stay with the ship. Coast Guard has difficulty finding. I'm not going to get into it all because number 6 is salvage operations. There's an immense thread going on right now with gCaptain. Why weren't the bodies found? They found one crew member, were not able to identify him, left him, tried to come back later, and he wasn't there. And people are saying, is that unusual? No. The Coast Guard does that frequently, but they usually leave a beacon with that to track the debris. They didn't. I don't know why. They were busy. You got to remember the Coast Guard is not search, and SAR does not stand for search and recovery. The Coast Guard is not a salvage organization. They are a rescue organization. But there's evidence in the salvage stuff. Who did Toad hire to provide the commercial salvage when they still thought that, the ship may be there, may be recoverable? I don't have the answers to all these questions, but the salvage master, the salvage companies, the private companies that the Coast Guard enlisted to find the debris, and not only that one, prior to the El Faro, there were the 2 lost boys in Florida. I think it was the most expensive search ever. Most exhaustive search in history. Coast Guard found nothing. They stopped. And it was handed over to private organization, and a merchant ship found the boys' boat. Life jackets that may or may not have been the boys were found by a private organization. I have some involvement with that. I can't speak of it because I signed an NDA. But I'm telling you, Coast Guard does not have advanced debris tracking. That's one of the reasons nothing was recovered. The rescue started late because of the hurricane. No fault of the Coast Guard. It was just slow starting. But a lot of people, myself included, think it ended early. There was a whole campaign back then. Coast Guard has no active duty UAVs. UAVs are proven by Customs and Border Patrol to find people in the middle of the ocean. Smugglers, the same technology will work with the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard has dragged their heels for years. All right, we don't want to launch a C-130 to recover debris, even if it contains evidence. It's expensive. I understand. Maybe we don't want to do cutters. This is 2016, guys. UAVs are available, and the other government organizations. Navy has access to satellites. Coast Guard doesn't. And this isn't just recovery, these UAVs. These UAVs can find people while they are still alive. These are the questions. Why were no debris found? Now, in the Coast Guard's defense, they put a lot of money and time into checking survival suits. Okay, I'm thankful for that report. gCaptain reported about it. They got to double down on the questions here. I want to know why UAVs are just starting now. They just put the first unit. They're not active yet. They're in this test phase. Why the debris tracking technology isn't working. Do scientists have better debris tracking methods? I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. The salvage evidence, the salvage master. These are questions I have not seen asked by the NTSB or the Coast Guard. They need to be asked. All right, we're halfway through. I'm going to look down at the questions here. Nerfleeka says, sir, greetings from Marino and the Sound of Music. Thank you. I think that's a mariners group in the Philippines. So thank you very much for joining us. Dave Wood says, take a look at the last couple of years' service reports from the annual Lifeboat Davit inspections. Number 8. We haven't gotten there yet, David. I'm going to get to the lifeboats. Don't worry about it. Mike Schuler, gCaptain's editor-in-chief, doing an excellent job bringing us diving into this information and sorting through this report. He's with us. Danny says, the pup agrees with me. Yes, the pup usually agrees with me. Yeah. So she's a little biased, but Leica's a good dog. Leica, if you're wondering the name, Leica is the first living thing ever to go into space. Before the United States sent monkeys, the Russians sent dogs. The very first dog was Leica. It's a little bit of a sad story, but I'm kind of a space buff, so that's where the name came from. Danny Davis says, experience is a good teacher. Someone else's experience is the best teacher. Yes, Danny, absolutely. This is why we have these investigations, to uncover the facts. But when the facts are uncovered with the Marine Electric, and then 20 years later, the number one finding is overturned, the ACP is instituted. Are we learning those facts if we redo the same things and I will tell you something else. There was a very, very brief mention of the Marine Electric in the beginning of the investigation, but I haven't seen anyone go through the Marine Electric reports, go through the other casualties and say, hey, is there a pattern here? I would love, not really a historian, we don't even have to go that far back, but I think the NTSB, it is their duty, the Coast Guard's duty, to go through every investigative report for the last 10 years, 20 years, I'd like 50 years, and find these threads, these things that we think we fixed that we didn't. I guarantee the results would be surprising. I can think of 3 major cases right now and a half dozen minor ones. It's one thing to learn from the mistakes, but you can't forget it. And the one promise I made to Frank Pusateri, Richard's son, I said, as long as gCaptain's running and I'm at the helm, we will not forget the El Faro. I think the memory's too short in the media and the world. The memory of the mariner isn't short, guys. Guys who worked on World War II Liberty ships converted, do not forget. But that's not me. That's not the next generation. And I'm not expecting every mariner to sit through history classes. But when major things are being fixed and then later on unfixed, again, I don't know that the ACP is a problem. I don't know that what it had to do with here. There are other benefits to the ACP besides this. But guys, I want to know why. How they justified starting this program when the Marine Electric's #1 finding was separation of class and flag state. Danny says, I dove the Marine Electric. Talk about a sad story again. Until the sea shall free them. It's not in very particularly deep water. And you can visit her today if you're a scuba diver. I'm a scuba diver, but I try not to go past 30 feet. It gets dangerous down there. But she's still there. Claudia Schultz says, I agree with you. The shipyard should be called to the question. Again, guys, thank you, Claudia. If you agree with me, tell the Coast Guard, tell the NTSB, tell your congresswoman, tell your friends, share that information. John Konrad says the #1 thing is the shipyards need to testify. When do you plan on calling Vigor to the stand? When do you plan on calling Atlantic Marine? Now again, guys, these guys are not guilty. But if you're doing business within the flag, and I'm not saying this thing, if you have information, and it costs money to do these investigations, the head lawyer Vigor may not know what the surveyor knows. So I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing here. Nothing I suggest is, it may be found that something is not kosher, but we have to ask the questions. Thank you, Claudia. Peter Montague says, have a wonderful discussion time. I like it. Thank you, Peter. And my good friend Brendan is calling in from New York. Brendan, we got to catch up again. My Schuyler alumni. I went to high school with Brendan. He's a smart, talented guy who's doing some great stuff in New York, Connecticut. All right, guys, back to the list. Thank you for the comments. Keep them coming. Keep the shares coming. Keep the likes coming. Every time you give a thumb up or a love or a wow, love to see some wows if any of this information is new to you. Some of it's new to me. Again, didn't come from me researching it. Wow, I had a few wows. Do that, share it. That's how the information gets out. That's how we're going to get the NTSB and the Coast Guard back on track with this. All right, number 7, up the chain. The Coast Guard had the Deepwater Horizon trials in New Orleans. Excellent. The CEO of the cementer, I'm drawing a blank, Transocean and BP were brought up in Congress. They answered questions in Congress. Are the CEOs of the parties, ABS, TOAD, are they being brought up in Congress? Ask your congressman to help investigate this. Now, we need a congressional hearing? That's debatable. But I've seen managers of TOAD, I've seen surveyors at ABS testify at these hearings. I want to see their bosses testifying at the hearings, and I want to see the top guys, the leadership, testifying at these hearings. If the CEO of the major 3 companies of the Deepwater Horizon have to go to Congress and answer to the man. The CEOs of these companies can at least go to Jacksonville and answer to the man, the NTSB. All right? We need to go up the chain with these, not focus on the crew. We got the captain, we got the captain's boss. Who's his boss? Who's the boss above that? We got the Coast Guard inspector. Who's his boss? I want those guys sitting in the hot seat. All right, that's number 7. Again, none of this comes from me. It's just good ideas that were submitted during, and I happen to agree with almost all of these. Number 8, life rafts. Is there any mariner? Please put a comment below if you think that open lifeboats are safe in tropical weathers. Is there anyone who would get in one in a hurricane situation? Why do we have open lifeboats? And again, going up the chain, Shad Harding, one of the very first major stories. And Shad Harding's lawyers called me personally and sent me letters and threatened to sue with Shad Harding lifeboats falling off of davits. You can go in gCaptain and search it. We reported that. I was on a ship with Shad Harding davits. I had problems at the time. I'm not saying they fixed a lot of the problems. They're doing better. I'm not calling out Shad Harding. I'm just saying they were Shad Harding boats. Shad Harding has the expertise in-house. Again, that's a thread. We need to find those experts. Shad Harding knows the lifeboat on the El Faro. They are the ones best equipped to answer the questions on why the lifeboats could not be launched. Again, a lot of us think we know. But could freefall davits launched? I don't know. The maintenance problems in the lifeboats? I want to see Shad Harding. I want to see not just generic lifeboat experts, not just the guy who surveyed the boat. I want to see the guys who built the boat and can answer the questions. I'd rather have the senior manager at Shad Harding than the surveyor. Because the surveyor only knows what he knows. He knows what he saw, and he can report those problems. But if a senior manager gets called by the NTSB and brought in the hot seat, you better believe he is going to ask questions of the surveyor. He's going to bring everyone with knowledge into him before he steps in that hot seat. He's going to get the answers so he can answer them in a trial. That's why we need to go up the chain of command, guys. So that was number 8, lifeboats. Life rafts, same thing. Did they have enough life rafts? Are we going to investigate the slides that cruise ship using? How are we getting from the ships to the lifeboats? What about the ancient idea of a float-free, like we have float-free EPIRBs? There are many patents and designs for float-free boats. Maybe not the first case scenario to use, but as a backup when the ship is listing and the davits will not work. All right? We've learned that open covered lifeboats don't work. That's why closed lifeboats are required now. That's why new ships have them, because they are better. What about the old ships? Can we finally get over this and put it in our past? And what other problems? How do we abandon ship in a hurricane? Number 9, follow all threads up and down. The NTSB. I can't tell you how many times reading through the transcript, I get this, oh my gosh face. And then the investigator asks something else. The big one is, Mrs. Davidson came up and said, my husband was fired from Crowley. And he ordered tugboats, and he did it. I'm not saying Crowley's guilty. Maybe he was fired for a different reason. I'm saying we got to ask those questions, and that's just the biggest example. There's so many other examples throughout the testimony where something, oh my goodness, and then the thread is lost. Maybe one follow-up question. If you look at the testimony of the Marine Electric, Robert Frump, I forget the guy's name. He was run out of the Coast Guard, the head Coast Guard investigator. But since then, the Coast Guard has given him many awards and named a lot of safety at him. He was a monster for going down the threads, following up every lead. I don't see that so far with the NTSB and the Coast Guard. Is evidence new gets uncovered, we got to go down the thread, meaning whoever has that bit of information, ask them as many questions as you can, but you can only go down so far before you hit dirt. Then you start climbing upwards. Ask his boss, the boss above him. The threads are being dropped. All right, I want to see something else. I've defended the captain. I've called the captain brave, and I got a mostly positive feedback, but I got a lot of negative. Why are you defending this guy? I've talked about the EPIRBs. I got feedback. I did a special. You want to be recovered on the next El Faro incident? You want the Coast Guard to find you or at least your body? No one watches. That's fine. I'm not trying to guilt you. I'm not trying to do anything else. But what I am trying to say is there is information here that is not being followed up on by investigators, by mariners, by things that we gotta follow these threads. Number 10, and I think we brought this one up again already, historical incident analysis. All right. We have the Java Sea. Number 1 finding, captain and one person has to be in charge at all times, had final authority. Transocean turns around and separates OIM and captain. I don't expect you guys who don't work offshore to realize this. The fact is, they had it, 2 people who were in charge. It didn't work. The investigation says 1 person has to be in charge. Then the Coast Guard ignored it when foreign flag operators came back years later with 2 people in charge. This was 1988. This isn't very long ago. I was talking on the phone today with a guy whose good friend perished on the Java Sea. The Exxon Valdez happened in 91. It was only a couple years later that container ships started putting all the fuel oil in, building double hulls and putting oil in. Despite the fact that a primary finding of the Exxon Valdez was we need more than 1 skin separation. And Marine Electric, separation of Coast Guard and ABS. Then we have the ACP. I'm not saying that was a cause. Maybe it turns out that the ACP is a great program and actually does so much to prevent incidents that it's worthwhile. I don't know. But I want historical analysis, a database of previous incidents, and this is something Jack Devaney, tank ship trauma, he was trying to put together and found it almost impossible to do on his own, of tank ship incidents. But this is something the NTSB has the resources along with the Coast Guard. I'm not talking those little things, but the major findings. The findings, and I will qualify, I want to start just with the findings that were then regulated. So there were all these findings. Out of those findings, we take each report for the last 50 years, we find the findings, and then we match a CFR reference. Was a new CFR law passed to plug the gap in this finding? Then we have a table of major incidents that regulators said we need findings. And then I want to match that table with the El Faro. That's how we plug historical loopholes that have come in incidents. I want to draw things, historical connections between, and I use historical. I'm not talking 10 years, 100 years ago. I'm not talking about things that Christopher Columbus learned, guys. I think most people here listening remember the Exxon Valdez. That wasn't long ago. All right, so those are my top 10. Let me see what other questions we have brought up here. Jim, Kill Up says, leave no rock uncovered. The crew deserves no less. And like I said, the Coast Guard and NTSB is doing that. They are not leaving one rock uncovered when it comes to the crew. There are many rocks left uncovered when it comes to shipyards, ABS, marine management. I'm gonna say the U word, guys. Unions. I haven't seen union testimony. Again, not saying the unions were involved here. But there was some question about why didn't they sound the general alarm earlier? Someone suggested, I don't know if it's true, that there were about overtime and it was too costly. I don't know, but who's at fault? But questions need to be asked of union reps along the Coast Guard tote, everyone with direct involvement going up the ladder. Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Joe Flatley says, is there documentation for the Faro cargo gear certification inspections that can be made available? They released some of the inspection reports, the Coast Guard and the ABS. But again, there are two reasons the Marine Electric, there's so many reasons why the Marine Electric said that class has to be separate inspections from the Coast Guard. There were really a lot. Read Robert Frump's book, but two of the big ones are, okay, the who pays the classification society. If you get paid by someone, you're indebted to them. Not saying that ABS purposely sees something and doesn't fix it, but how much effort do they do in looking for it? These are questions. That's Robert Frump's analysis, but there's also a question of basic redundancy, guys. Basic redundancy. Coast Guard has a different perspective on things than ABS. Getting two eyes on a ship, two eyes on an inspection, coming from different angles, flag and class, is good. I come from the offshore, my last set of ships, drill ships, everything's redundant in a dynamic positioning system. Redundancy is engineered against, and with the ACP, a lot of the redundancy was lost. There are some of the reports, survey reports, but they come from one guy. There's Coast Guard ones too, but a lot of it was handed off. And I don't really know the exact answer is what I'm saying, Joe, but I know some reports were released, definitely not all of them, and some reports should have been released, weren't even created in the first place. Jim says they are a disaster, ban them. I don't know who you're talking about. It doesn't say who I was referring to. James Bard says, open life rafts are not appropriate in this day and age. It's 2016. We have the technology to do better. Okay, I'm going to do I'm going to do my own wow face. There we go. That's me doing the wow face. Were the life rafts on the El Faro? I haven't gone into the life rafts. Were the life rafts on the El Faro open? They didn't have a cover? Or were you talking about lifeboats? I don't know. But either case, we need to look into the life rafts. We need to look into the lifeboats. I mean, people wonder why no one survived. You take this huge canister and you get a hernia trying to throw it overboard. And then it starts floating away, and you got to pull it in by hand, guys. Did the El Faro use a crane launch life raft? I don't know. Our crane life, I've used them many times. Am I going to be able to operate that in a hurricane? I don't think so. But if we're just tossing the containers over and then expecting the guys to jump in the water and swim, this is 2016, guys. They're better systems, and it needs to be looked into. Joe says, I'd rather have open life rafts replaced with modern lifeboats. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a question of rather, Joe. I'm sorry, but it's a question of it just has to be done. Basic things we've learned through the history of incidents, the regulations, the CFR, I don't know how many times at SUNY Maritime, Professors have told me these CFRs are written in the blood of the previous generations. Be thankful. Have gratitude for every word written here. Being a bit of a wise cadet, I'd say, everyone. No, not everyone. The important ones. And I'm telling you, things in the CFR there are loopholes now that aren't being passed. We talked about they finally closed the one on the double hull container ships. Hopefully they've closed the OIM Captain one. Is the ACP going to get closed? I don't know. I don't even see where they're asking the questions about the ACP in the testimony. It's briefly mentioned, but they're not asking the high levels. The surveyor on the El Faro did not develop the ACP program. He did not do the analysis of the safety risk factors of the ACP. He's not the guy to ask. Who signed up? Who was the admiral at the Coast Guard, the working committees that signed off on that? All right, Brendan Mannon says, was the third mate on a ship with old open boats? Yeah, I mean, the training ship had them. They're difficult. You remember the Fleming gear where you're trying to move the propeller with your feet? My first tanker had open boats too. Yeah. Then Brendan says, I would rather head to the raft myself. Maybe that's why they can't moor to the raft. But again, if you got to throw the damn canister over and jump in the water and swim to the raft in these conditions, sure, people do it every year and survive. Not in hurricane force winds. And how many of the guys were close and lost in that swimming? We don't know. We don't have that evidence. There's got to be a better way to embark on these life rafts than just throwing this huge canister over, jumping in and hoping for the best. And again, they have to bring the life raft manufacturer, and I'm not 100% sure who. I haven't read the life raft reports yet. The lifeboats manufactured shed ironing. They have to bring in shed ironing. They got to grill them on better system, better ways. Gravity fall lifeboats, would that work with this list? I don't know, and that's the problem. I don't know, and neither does the NTSB. Shed Harding might not even know. But you get Shed Harding on the stand, and he reviews it with his engineers, and he asks the right questions, we will find out. But unless that happens, no one's going to know. Jan said, it's sad we never know why they didn't follow the 1, 2, 3 rule. We don't. Again, but that either comes under we'll never find out, or the NTSB and the Coast Guard, again, are very good at finding the faults of mariners. If it can be found out, I'm sure it will be. But we also have to ask, why did TOTE not monitor the 1, 2, 3 world? Did they have a private firm, a private meteorologist monitoring that ship? Did he follow the 1, 2, 3 world? Did he communicate with the ship? Did the CAM say no to him? Did the TOTE say no to him? Did someone else say no to him? Again, not throwing any blame here. Asking questions. Socratic method. Future BRM is the Socratic method, asking questions. Nathan says, wanted to point out one particular protection during U.S. Coast Guard investigations that people may not be aware of, Title 46, Code 6308. Quote, and I'm going to read this because I think I know what he's going at, and I think it's important. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, no part of a report of a marine casualty investigation conducted under, all right, it goes off. I can't read the whole comment. I think he's saying there are legal protections if you blow the whistle on your employer, if you work for one of these companies and have information. Whether you do or don't, and if you're not willing to talk to the Coast Guard directly, I think every mariner should have license insurance. If you got some information, ask to talk to your license insurance lawyer. Tell him the information so he can pass it on to the Coast Guard. We got to get this information out there, guys. If you got a relative who's an admiralty lawyer, graduated Maritime Academy with an admiralty lawyer, and you're sitting down on this information, buy him a beer, sit down with him, say, hey, I got some info. How do I put this out without losing my job, my reputation, and so forth? Turn to your friends. If you have information, we need to hear it. And as Frank says, we need to get it to the Coast Guard. And if you're not feeling comfortable on getting it in, find a way. And understand that your legal protections in doing so. There are significant protections for whistleblowers nowadays. Jim says, Dominic Colici. That's my hero. That's the hero. There are two heroes of the Marine Electric. They tried to roll the crew. They put the spotlight on the crew. The captain on board passed away. The off-duty captain lawyered up with the management company, and they tried to throw this investigation down the road and blame it on the crew as quickly as possible. When the converted World War II ships were failing, those are the facts. Dominic Colici, he was told by his bosses not to dig so he was told by the Coast Guard, hey, let it go. This is why the NTSB is in the investigation, guys. The Coast Guard, there are Coast Guard people liable. There are regulations in the Coast Guard written by people that were not followed or written wrongly that are going to come out in the investigation. There are people in the Coast Guard. I'm not saying they want to hide the facts. It's just not in their best interest to hide the facts. If you don't understand what we're up against, again, read Until the Sea had Freedom and read this book published by Harvard, and you'll see how far up the chain this goes and why we need to really spread out the spider webs here. And Dominic Colici is a hero, a hero. The other hero is the owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer. He put hundreds of thousands of dollars into journalists to uncover this. There is no media organization today who's going to do that. They want that story of the captain going down with the ship. They want the story of the captain telling the second mate, we're not moving. They don't want all this other story. Not that they won't print it. Not that it's not a good story. It's that it's expensive. Right? You look at the movie about the Catholic Church in Boston, and you look, they had the top journalists all working for over a year on it. Paying the salary of a half dozen top journalists to uncover this is expensive. The Philadelphia Inquirer knew it, and at the end, Robert Frump thanks the owner of the Inquirer and says, hey, listen, thank you for investing this money. We really made a difference here. Laws were changed. Thank you. And the owner said, you know what? Don't thank me. I made profit tenfold. A good story. You know how many new papers and awards we've gotten for this? So there's money in uncovering this, and I, as a publisher, realize that. If I had a few $100,000, I would throw it into journalists, and we'd have stacks of paper here, guys. But the big organizations, they don't have the money or the appetite to go into this, and gCaptain simply doesn't have that sort of resources now to hire these journalists. Hopefully that will change in the future. It's something I'm really looking hard at. But Dominic Colici, hero, along with Robert Frump and his boss. Frank says, Peter Keller benchmarks safety with delivery of products. Arrogance. I'm not sure who Peter Keller is, Frank. Maybe I missed that. Is he a tote guy? Then Frank says, the executive VP of tote benchmark safety with delivery of goods in a timely manner. Tom Rothroth, Forrest, that was the lead investigator. He retired. Now Brian Young has been made a lead investigator. Rothy was, I wouldn't say he was, I definitely wouldn't say he was Dominic Colici, but he was a hard guy and asked hard questions. My report says that Young is not asking hard questions, following threads to the level of Rothy. Again, Frank's got some interesting things here, and he's really working hard on this. Frank is the father of Rich Pusateri, the chief engineer, and he's doing a great job organizing some of this information and getting it to investigators. So thank you, Frank, for sticking with it. As hard as this is for me to report on and dig into, and it's hard. I mean, I was in tears yesterday. It's way harder for Frank and the families who were involved in continuing this. And that's why I feel that I need to say these things. And why I want shipyards, starting with shipyards, on the stand. Jim McKillop says open boats are useless unless you're in sheltered waters. Frank again says, John, only the crew was placed under the microscope. Again, people are saying gCaptain's going easy on the crew, going easy on the captain. I'm not. I'm letting the professionals. Those guys have the crew under the microscope in the spotlight. I'm just looking forward. As a ship captain, the spotlight's there. We're moving this way. What's in those dark regions? And as you know, very well know, when you shine a spotlight in one area of the sea, everything else gets murky and darker than it originally is. That's what's happening in this investigation right now. You put too much spotlight on the crew, everything else is getting just a little bit murky. Pat Rooney says, Mr. Pusateri, I'm very sorry for your loss. It's unfortunate in today's age that decisions are made that cost human lives. Agree, Pat. George says, I sailed in the oil industry where the captain has no union protection, and multiple times he stood down the company and refused to sail due to safety concerns. Yes, I've been there too. And you know, there's benefits. Like I'm saying, I said, the U-word union representatives need to be at this trial. They need to be asked the questions. Hey guys, there may be excellent. There may be things the union's doing. Maybe they provided, again, total speculation, maybe they provided Captain Davidson with lawyers and help after the Crowley. Maybe they talked to Toad and says, if you hire him, you have to let him do it again. I don't know. There's good and bad on both sides. If we don't ask the question, we definitely won't find the bad and fix it, but we're not going to find the good. Part of the investigation is finding the things we're doing right. If you get the union on the stand and there are things that the union is doing right, we need to know about those too. If there are things, I said, vigor, Atlantic Marines, number one on my list, those guys, I guarantee, are doing something right too. That's part of the investigation. That's part of being on the stand. What are they doing right? What advice did they give that was good to the El Faro vigor before she came in shipyard? Goes both ways. The important thing is to ask the questions. Claudia says, our loved ones are no longer here to speak for themselves and are being investigated. So much is wrong with this. Again, guys, it's, Claudia, it's just not fair. Everything's talking about fair and balanced news and this fake news and all these problems with the media. Where's the fairness here? Is it fair that we know so much about the mates? Talked about the second mate. We know her diet. We know who she had a relationship. We know personal details that wouldn't be published in a major magazine. And okay, maybe that's necessary. I don't think it is, but maybe the NTSB finds it necessary. Well, fairness says, who else is involved? Let's ask their friends and family these hard questions. I'm not saying it's easy for Toad. I'm not saying they're bad guys. I'm not saying ABS and any of these things. And again, part of asking questions is finding the good things. There are some attaboys. I gave an attaboy to the captain. I gave one to the chief mate, the second mate. I gave an attaboy to the third mate. The various ABs require attaboys. The chief engineer did, damn, such a good job. The engineers were all on. There are a lot of attaboys to give out. And not just on the crew, but shoreside too. So when I say that Shad Harding, Atlantic Marine, Vigor, ABS, Coast Guard Admirals, ATC, when I list these down, I know we're going to find some bad things that need to be fixed, but I also know we're going to find some good things, and those good things will save lives too, guys. And with that note, I want to end episode 21 of gCaptain Live. It's a passionate thing. Again, shipyards, number one on my list, but all 8 of these, All of these came to me because it was number one on someone else's list. They shared their concern with me. I correlated this information, and how we're going to do this is get the information out there. Share this with friends. No, not just what I say, but you read something in our competitors. Share it with them. Call the Congress. I gave the Coast Guard's email address, lfaro@uscg.mil. Send them this video. Send them articles from someone else. Ask them questions that you have. I'm getting a ton of questions about the lube oil deliveries and things that I can't answer, but I know who can. So if you got a question, I'm more than happy to try to dig into it. But ask the questions of El Faro. And the last thing I want to say here is Frank just laid the comment. Mariners need to come forward. If you have information, come forward to the Coast Guard. If you're scared about your job or something else, you can call me directly. I blew the whistle. But I also suggest, if you have license insurance, call that up. That's what you're paying for, guys. Call up that lawyer. Lawyers always want to be called before you do something. If you don't have license insurance, find the buddy who you went to school with. Call him up. If you're a hawse piper and you don't have a buddy, call your buddy who's a maritime grad. Say, who did you go to school with who's a Admiralty lawyer? Fact is, I don't care how the information gets there. Find out what you need to do to get that information out. It's how we're going to solve this, and it will save lives because, guys, I went through a lot of trauma blowing the whistle with Transocean. I got fired. I lost my job. It was a financially difficult time. There was some emotional distress. I had not called a lawyer before. I had not prepared myself. If I had done that, a lot of that would have been wiping out. But even with all that distress, I'm very thankful I did. You know, it's hard to live with things inside. You know, and you can also talk to priests and find those people who have to keep your secret. And, you know, don't ask them, should I give this information to the Coast Guard or should I not? Say, hey, Mr. Lawyer. Hey, Father. Hey, Padre. Hey, Minister. I want to share this thing that's been weighing heavily on my chest, and I would like your help to figure out how to get it out there without all those consequences. So, again, Frank says Mariners need to come forward. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Share this. Send it to you. Send this video. Send the articles. Send everything to lfaro@uscg.mil. Share with your friends. Email, text, anything you can do. Let's hold the NTSB's nose to the grindstone. Let's hold the Coast Guard, NTSB accountable for their actions. Let's push this forward. I can only come up here and speak. It's you guys that have to do the sharing. Thank you so much for your support. We're going to get through this, guys. Frank, we're going to get through this, family of the crew. Thank you for sticking with this. I know it's harder for you than it is for me, and it's hard for all the guys who have sailed at sea. This has been episode 21 of gCaptain Live. I'm gCaptain's founder and CEO, Captain John Konrad. Until next time, fair winds and following seas.